Hi, everyone, and welcome to the second virtual event in our Run This Town Women's Music Month event series in partnership with the Stax Museum of American Soul Music. I'm Elizabeth Cawein, and I'm so excited tonight to be able to have a conversation with someone who I admire very much and who has been such an integral part of the Memphis music story. Um, I'll just say quickly before we begin that if you missed our conversation last week between Tanya Dyson and Joyce Cobb, you'll definitely want to check that out. It's available on our YouTube channel and over on Facebook at the We Are Memphis Facebook page. So I want to thank Miss Deanie Parker for being a part of this evening. Just going to add her into the stream now. And for those who don't know, Deanie Parker was one of the, she's a Stax OG. She was a Stax Records artist, the label's first publicist, first president and CEO of the Soulsville Foundation, among many other things, which we're going to get into tonight. So welcome, Miss Parker. We're so glad that you're here.
Good evening. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. So I have so many questions. So I'm gonna dive right in. So hopefully we can get to everything that I've got lined up here. Being one of those folks who wears many hats, I have always felt is a very Memphis thing, and that's definitely a good way to describe your professional evolution with Stax because you really did it all. When you were growing up, did you ever imagine that you would build a career like the one that you eventually did?
Oh, let's see, Elizabeth. When I was growing up, um, I'm not certain how old I was before I even knew what the meaning of the word career was. There weren't many people in my environment who even used the word. But when I think back about my childhood, uh, the things that I used to enjoy using my imagination to entertain myself, the makings were there. I think that uh, without knowing exactly what it was I was doing, without being able to label what I was doing, I was mentally and emotionally preparing myself to function in a supervisory capacity and to make things happen.
Yeah.
So, the moral of that explanation, Elizabeth, is that um, you shouldn't ever stifle the imagination and creativity of a child between the ages of maybe 6 and 10. When they are imagining that they are teachers, doctors, nurses. I used to be a teacher. I was a preacher. I was a mom. I was all of those um, kind of women that I had exposure to during that age, and some that I had no real time exposure to. But I had a pretty vivid imagination.
Well, I'm glad you did. So your story includes a lot of firsts. The first and only, as far as I know, publicist for Stax Records, one of the first female publicists in the music business, period. Not to mention how young you were at that time. There would have been plenty of challenges for you in terms of just gaining the respect of your industry peers. And I'm just really curious, what was that time like for you when you were starting out as you taught yourself the ropes?
Elizabeth, I have always used two words when I talk about myself and where I am today and how I got here. One is a blessing, and the other is good luck,
Mm.
good fortune, if you will. Um, I was blessed to be in the family into which I was born. and I won't elaborate on that. I had the good fortune to become a part of the Stax family at the right age during
Mm,
the time when men and women respected each other because they were
mm,
taught the value of respecting and being respected. And so that I ended up at Stax Records in a family that was nurturing, starting with the first person at the point of entry, Estelle Axton. And I befriended the people who were at Stax, the foundation, if you will, the people responsible for being the foundation of Stax Records, who really, I'm certain that they knew that I was pretty naive and unexposed, and they, really built a fence around me, if you will, in many ways. And not only were they protective, but they were mentors.
mm,
And nobody felt intimidated because none of us knew anything. So we were all learning at the same time. There was no need to be jealous. Um, because we, all of us, were in the right place at the right time and provided opportunities that not many people in any industry could say that they had,
mm,
especially in an industry that really did have environments or companies that were more integrated than any other, as far as I know.
mm,
And that says a lot for Memphis, being in the South at that particular time, that we experienced the freedom to share ideas, to challenge each other creatively, and to benefit from what everybody contributed. So I hope I answered your question.
absolutely. No, you did. And I'd love to kind of keep going a little bit deeper into your work, particularly your work as the publicist for Stax Records, because I find this so interesting. I'm a former music publicist myself, and I know how much things changed really just in the 10 or so years that I was doing it. And that was in the 2000s. And so much changed. And so I would just really love to get in the weeds a little bit and just have you talk about what was a typical album release like for you? And, were you working with print and TV and radio, and how are you building relationships? What was that typical album release like?
Well, I'm happy that you asked that question because I really get a kick out of thinking about how crude things were in the industry and how we were unable to log in, to click and have access to everything that we needed in an instant, and to share everything that we had created, and that the fact that you didn't have to be in the studio to record today. You don't have to be in the studio to record a record because we can be in all parts of the world and online put all of this together. And I mean, it's still magical to me. I can't figure out how they do it. But at any rate, a glimpse into my world in 1963 through 73. We didn't have laptops, Elizabeth. We had portable typewriters. We had stationary typewriters, and we had portable typewriters. And I had an executive typewriter and I had a personal typewriter. My personal typewriter was red, and my big gray commercial uh, uh, executive typewriter was for those enormous sheets of paper that we had to work with. So, if I had been smart, I would have invested in IBM at that time, and I would have been a millionaire by now. But we could not delete. There was no such thing as deletion. You had the backspace, use liquid whiteout or correction tape, And so the one thing that taught me was precision. You
Mm.
had to be precise, or you would have spent the entire day backspacing, whiting out, and correcting. And of course, we had landlines. We didn't have this iPhone on which you're um, talking with me, which is amazing. And you wouldn't know this, but at the time that we had those landlines, all of our phone numbers also had prefixes. You know, it was like Whitehall 62353 or whatever. And this was before the age of facsimiles. We didn't even have fax machines. The first fax that
Mm.
I ever used had a big fat rubber cup on the end of the connection that you had to put over the mouthpiece of the phone and put it down in a cradle and put paper in, a special kind of paper, and it had a horrible odor. And you know, that is how we had to send our printed information, our graphics, to wherever it needed to go. And if you didn't use it right away, the paper turned brown and you lost the image. And so we had addressograph machines that we used to make our labels, because as you can imagine, one of the responsibilities that we had in publicity was to assist with distributing these demo 45s to disc jockeys across the country.
Mm.
And so we didn't have the luxury of digital labels, no programs of that sort. And so there were these horrible metal, rectangular uh, pieces that you had to punch out the name in, and you would file these things, and they would cut your hands in 100 different places as you were trying to put them into the machine to run the labels. It was unbelievable, you know, and we had to have an X-Acto knife. You had to know how to use the X-Acto knife to cut the ruby lith overlay in order to get the four colors. You know, so I could go on, but I think you get I think you get a picture of how challenging it was. Not to
Yeah.
mention the fact, Elizabeth, that we were in Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis, Tennessee was and still is a secondary market when you compare it to Chicago, to New
Right.
York, to Los Angeles. And so we really were landlocked in many, many, many ways. First of all, we never got anything first here, although we did create some first. You know,
Yes.
but in terms of the latest in so-called technology at that time and what have you, we were not on the grid at that time.
Mm. That's something that I've thought about so much, because even with email and all the technology I had, it was always a challenge for me to develop those relationships with folks in LA or New York, working from here in Memphis. And I just thought, how would you do that without the internet, without Google, without your friend to Google? But you certainly made it work. So you have already mentioned Estelle Axton tonight, and I know that you have credited her as a role model for you at Stax, but I just imagine that you must have had some pretty incredible women as examples in your life outside of Estelle. What about the women in your family, and how did they sort of pave the way for you?
Well, the women in my family were unbelievable. They were, a couple of them were very enterprising, um, but they were always very modest, um, extremely supportive,
Mm.
unbelievably strong women, considering what they all had to deal with, how difficult it was to accumulate anything as African American women, um to uh to just navigate on a daily basis, trying to provide for their families, to encourage their men. Um, they're phenomenal. They were phenomenal women. There were two in particular. My youngest aunt, my mother's sister, was the first African American. What was she? She was over the apparel department for Julius Lewis, and
Mm.
she purchased all of the apparel for women's wear and lingerie. That was the first. I had another aunt who decided to leave Memphis and settle in Indianapolis, who worked for RCA. I still have a couple of those items that she sent to me when she was working there. That was before the days of Elvis Presley, even.
Mm.
Um, and that aunt, who we lost at the end of January because she was in a long-term care facility and she did not escape COVID-19.
I'm so sorry.
She was the one that reared me, actually.
Mm.
And she said to me, when I got old enough to understand it and look back and laugh with her, that one of the reasons that she registered for continuing education at the college level was because she wanted to study child psychology to try and understand better what made me tick. and so and so she was a leader in her community, always accepting opportunities to make life better for people that look like me and that look like her, people who otherwise did not have opportunities and had no way of defining what those opportunities were or how to acquire them. And so she had a lot to do with what I am today in her own subtle way. But women were different then, you know. In there, I mean, they had a different kind of confidence.
Mm.
You know, they were subtle, but they were very effective. The women
Mm.
in my family were. Um, and so, you know, I had a couple of aunts who just wanted to be impeccable uh, home engineers, otherwise known as housewives. and and so, yeah, when I think about it, I'm very proud of the women in my family, my maternally and paternally. Yes.
Yeah. Well, you say that they had confidence, and certainly I think that was obviously true of you as well. They passed it along to you. I know that you actually came to Stax after winning a talent contest at the old Daisy. And your career and your Stax story really started as an artist and a songwriter. So I have some questions about that, but I'm curious what motivated you to make the transition into the business side of things. And also, I'd love to know if you continue to do any songwriting.
Um, the first couple of major engagements that I had, performance appearances that I made outside of Memphis were they had a great deal to do with defining and determining, if you will, my decision to get off the stage and
Mm.
out from under the Klieg lights. I realized that was not my calling. First of all, people laugh at me when I say this to them, but it didn't take me long to realize that I was not going to be a threat to Gladys Knight and Aretha. You know, I couldn't touch her. And Patti LaBelle and those girls, you know, they're so phenomenal. And
Mm.
I I um I tear up today when I look at those women. Those were my sheroes.
Mm,
That was real talent. They are real talent. They are the last of that era. And I think it's a tragedy that the industry has not invested in uh, women that excel uh, in the genre of music that they popularized. I just, it breaks my heart because
mm,
when they're gone, that's it. And so I learned an important thing about being an artist committed to the profession at the time when I thought I wanted to be a superstar and give Tina Turner hell. And and that was that the road was certainly no place for a Black person, a Black woman
mm,
in particular at that time.
mm,
And if you'll just use your imagination and travel back to 1960, the early 60s, you know that there were no hotels easily available, readily available. Uh, to travel on the highway was dangerous. I think driving while Black is for real. Um, no restaurants, no hotels, the conditions, the accommodations. You had to really want that kind of a career desperately, really
mm,
badly to do it, to accept it, to love it, and to be the best at it. And we had some women that did it. I mean, my hat goes off to them. They have my ultimate respect because
mm.
it was a rough life. It was a
Yeah.
rough life in every way. Then after you survived the lack of accommodations and transportation, you were going to be cheated out of much of what you did in the business.
Mm,
You didn't have access to the kind of exposure that other artists had. It was just tough. It was what every element of the business for a Black person, male and female, was a major challenge. So you just had to be terribly determined and driven. And I just didn't have I didn't have the fortitude to do it. I decided, and of course, my parents helped me to make the decision that I was going to go to school. Whether I went into the music industry as a performer or otherwise,
mm,
taking college off the table was not an option for me. So I decided that perhaps I could convince Jim Stewart, who had not at that time been exposed to the best talent that there was, then maybe I could, be a contributor in terms of his artist at Stax Records. He gave me that opportunity, but he and Estelle both recognized that maybe I had a little something else that I could offer that the organization did not have at the time. And that was someone that was eager to get on the job training to support my formal education and become a marketer, communication specialist, publicist, because we didn't have one at Stax Records. And although I was the second employee of record at Stax Records, did you hear that, David Porter? Uh, uh, you know, I knew that the road was not for me, and I made the right decision. I made the
mm,
right decision, and so I go back to blessings and good fortune.
mm,
And I was really blessed to be in the right place at the right time, and connected with a company that was founded by a Jim Stewart, a man of impeccable character, and worked with and learned from the co-owner, Estelle Axton, who mothered all of us. And she was determined. She was. she was awesome. I mean, the woman was just, and she was enterprising and she was creative. And she had so much common sense. They called it mother within. And, I think about how she listened to every record that was released into the marketplace that sounded like the kind of music that she and Jim determined that we were going to create and record at Stax. And she analyzed those songs and she watched her customers' reaction when she would put that 45 on the turntable. And she communicated all of that information to the guys that were part of the creative team in the studio. And if they failed to understand what she was describing to them, that is the beat, the message, whether it was a male, female artist, group, harmony, whatever it was, she would invite you into the record shop to listen, where she knew you would get the message. And so she was our our research and development division. That's what she had it. She created it in her own crude way. She did it. It was necessary. And so Estelle really encouraged me to try a lot of things that only us girls would know about. Because she had done it. And one of the other things I think that I might have learned is that sometimes women don't try something or push for something or insist on something different or better or bigger, not because they're waiting until they think they're competent. When all they really need to do is to be confident. Because I guarantee you 99% of the men out here are not competent.
Hello? Amen.
But they exhibit confidence. So you wouldn't know that they aren't competent. So, take a lesson there.
Oh, my goodness. Amen. Amen. And so that really connects into this next question I have for you, which is, you did so many roles. You took on so many hats really at Stax. What would be the job that you did at the label, big or small, that you think would surprise people the most?
Whoa. Now that's an interesting question. What job did I do that I think would perhaps surprise people the most? Well, I think that maybe it might sound like a small thing, but I think that, to me, it was a big thing because I realized, again, how blessed I had been that I had been exposed to a number of things that so many of our artists had not been given an opportunity to experience. And so we were working closely with radio announcers across the country. One of the things that we did was to produce and record promotional spots for them. I mean, it had mutual benefits, of course. And, there were artists who really were not literate. And I would find myself in the studio reading their copy line for line while they read it back so that we could capture them on tape doing a promotional piece. But you don't talk about those kinds of things. So I'm not insulted that I did that. I feel really good that they trusted me, that they confided in me, that they allowed me the opportunity to help them, because my interest was in making sure that all of our Stax artists had positive images and that they were on top of their game. So that might surprise some people to know that, that was one of the things that I did at Stax Records.
Oh, that's really beautiful, though. That's a beautiful story. Well, so I'd love to talk a little bit about how Stax Records sits in the overall Memphis music story. I often think about Stax and how the music that was created there and soul music as it compares to like what was happening in Detroit, for example, with Motown. But I'd love to really place it in the local context of what was happening here in Memphis. I know that there was a music industry in the city in the 60s. So what was it like, outside the walls of Stax and navigating that?
Outside the walls of Stax in Memphis, or or nationally, are you asking me?
Really, what was the industry like in Memphis?
Oh, Memphis, what was the industry like?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Elizabeth, we had our own Memphis music community. And perhaps we have that now, and it's underground, and I don't see it. And perhaps because I'm not in the daily mix, I don't feel it. There was an enormous benefit to having a Memphis music community. And the front door to that Memphis music community was sometimes the concession area next to Satellite Records. Before the entryway to Stax Studio. It was where you would see local musicians, writers, artists, producers, and others congregating on any given day and on weekends to learn where the paying engagements were, to find out where the sessions were for the week, to learn which artists were coming to Memphis, and so on. That was the kind of community we had. There was friendly competition between Stax and High and Gold Wax and the other labels, but there was that pride in what we had created, and it really was the Memphis sound that we created. We defined it with the horn lines and the driving rhythm and the rawness, and so I have my thoughts about what has happened to the music industry in Memphis, and I'm going to say that it has deteriorated in many ways, unfortunately. Perhaps those who are in it now will say she doesn't know what she's talking about, and they might be right. But compared to what it was we had then, where we were promoting each other, we were sharing, we were engaged in friendly competition, which pushed us to learn and to create and to it made the
Oh, you cut out a little bit there.
Yes, it's because I've got a call coming in from Australia. I don't know. Oh,
well, you're back now, so that's all right.
Good.
Australia can call you back another time.
Okay. Yes, they call me back later. But at any rate, Elizabeth, we were so busy at that time that I'm not certain that we had a lot of time to be swept up in what was happening outside of Stax Records.
Mm.
And interestingly, we didn't really want to be, those of us who were on the inside of Stax Records doing what we were doing, making a difference creatively. We were not excited about some of the things that were going on in Memphis. I mean, it was really difficult to want to do anything except to change what was happening on the outside of Stax Records at that time, when policemen were still coming by and telling our artist, Otis Redding and Isaac Hayes, who might have been standing out front talking, or Jim Stewart and Isaac, or whomever, anybody, any integrated group standing out in front of Stax Records could expect to be asked to go on the inside and not to congregate on the outside of Stax Records underneath the marquee at that time. So that's one of the reasons I think I'm having difficulty embracing that question, because it wasn't a heck of a lot happening outside of the physical structure that we enjoyed being inside, on the inside, where we enjoyed being on the inside, that motivated us to want to spend any time on the outside. I mean, it was typical 1961, early 60s Memphis. So what was that? I mean, what, as a Black person in particular, now, if you had been Steve Cropper or Duck Dunn, or, you know, one of our other white brothers going to what was in East Memphis before you got to Highland, or some other place, perhaps your take on that situation would have been different. But we were totally segregated. The schools were segregated when I first came to Memphis. And the city was more interested in discrediting everything that we were doing, and being intimidated by the fact that we had a financially profitable organization being run by an integrated team, and that we were a phenomenal success. And so it put us in a position where, you know, they began to closely monitor us, especially when Isaac Hayes came home with the Oscar for the film score Shaft, and which afforded him an opportunity to move out on Shady Grove. Oh my God, you know. And so, you know, we had many successes. We were the largest, most diverse Black-owned integrated record company in the music industry at that time.
How much did you think, particularly in the earlier days of your career, about yourself as a female publicist or a female Stax executive versus just a publicist, just an executive? You know, you were, as far as I'm concerned, you were really breaking ceilings left and right. But I always wonder how much anyone who does that is really consciously aware of that at the time, and how that's impacting the way you're moving through it all.
Quite honestly, I didn't focus on Deanie. I focused on what Deanie's vision was and what Deanie wanted to achieve and the results. I didn't, you know, I didn't feel threatened, because, as you've just said, I don't know of anybody else at the time who was in the industry doing what I was doing. And so
right.
There was no need for me the competition was not there. Fortunately, I had the support that I needed within Stax Records, that made me feel very secure. And so and actually all my life I have found that it has been to my benefit not to focus on Deanie, not to
Mm,
let my ego get in the way. I love working behind the scenes, and after having developed the plan and the strategy and implementing it and seeing the results, that's how I get my high. if
mm,
you if you are successful, and you're the focus of my attention and effort, if it's all about Elizabeth, then we're going to put all of our energy and give all of our attention to developing Elizabeth. And that was my attitude about
mm,
everything that I did at Stax. And because we were so successful, Elizabeth, it afforded me an opportunity to keep my eyes on what it was we were trying to achieve.
mm,
Because each step that I made and I saw others making, everything that we were doing was rewarding. It had its
mm.
benefits, and it had to be some good stuff, Elizabeth. Because listen, this music is still with us today.
Amen.
It is one of the most lucrative catalogs that there is, and that's one of the reasons why today my energy goes in trying to preserve what it was we created, because it is a genre of music that in its purest form, as we created it and produced it and released it into the marketplace, it's not there. It's been adulterated. It's been modified, and that's okay. That's what the music business does. And I'm
Mm,
flattered that the rappers, and I don't know about I'm sorry, the hip hoppers. I don't know about the rappers. When they go in the closet and they find these Isaac Hayes pieces and what have you, uh, and they want to take a little bit from here and a little bit from there, I think it's wonderful. That's what this music is all about. But it
yeah.
does disturb me that the industry and the market has a way of, is the word homogenizing?
Mm, mm-hmm.
Just sort of, so that we don't have a definitive sound any longer. You know, the Stax Music Academy, and you knew I was going to get a plug in for them. The Stax Music Academy is so crucial to the preservation of that music that we created at the corner of College and Macklemore. Because if we don't introduce those children to what it was we did and allow them to take ownership of it and to recognize that it really is theirs, it's their legacy, we're going to lose it. We're going to lose it. And it won't just be our loss, it'll be Memphis's loss.
Mm,
Because when you think about it, there aren't many musics, if any at all, created in America that Memphis cannot claim in some way,
amen.
uh, so much of the music that we hear today has its roots right here in Memphis. It might be jazz, it could be gospel, it could be the blues. When you think about it, Memphis is known for its musical innovations.
Absolutely.
uh, and I want the youngsters to enjoy what it is that they like, and that they and their peers listen to. But I want them also to know about their music history and to appreciate what put Memphis on the map, going all the way back to the blues on Bill Street and coming through High Records and Stax and Gold Wax and American, and it's important, Elizabeth. It really is important. uh I don't know, maybe it's being done in our school system, those two or three that still offer music at all.
Mm,
And that's another problem I have, is that, we expect to continue our history, or not lose the feeling, to hold on to the vibe, but we're not investing anything in it, so
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Well,
hope that it's happening underground. I go back to that. I don't know what's happening out here. I'm not feeling it. I don't hear any hits coming out of Memphis in the genre of music that I cut my teeth on, that I love dearly. Um, uh, Unless somebody comes to Memphis and engages some of our musicians or engineers or producers, I don't see it coming out of Memphis. I see others coming into Memphis to take the ingredients that only Memphis can provide on a recording session and
yeah.
going back to wherever they have come from. I'm flattered about that as well, but it doesn't create the kind of stability that I want Memphis music to have. It
Sure.
doesn't make us a viable music industry. And I think we probably have a couple of hundred recording studios here in Memphis now. Why, I
Amen.
don't know. But at any rate, so be it.
Well, they are people out there making the music, but I want to talk about one of the things that can help us ensure that future, which is all of the work that you've done with the Soulsville Foundation, and kind of pivot to this part of your story. This is really a fascinating chapter to me because it has to be an understatement to say that it was a dream come true to be able to bring Stax back to Soulsville through the museum and the academy, which you've mentioned, and the charter school. But I have to imagine that it also had to be really hard, because it always is when you're so close to something. And I'm curious if there's anything that you would go back and tell yourself on day one of that role of being, taking on that leadership role with bringing the Soulsville Foundation to life. Anything that you learned along the way that you would go back and tell yourself?
Oh yes, but I can't say it publicly. So we better move. We better move on to the next issue. And yes, was it challenging? Was it hard? I don't know what 9 months labor is like, but I can tell you what 18 months labor is like. And
Mm,
so, yes, I'm very close to it. It was challenging and it's still difficult
mm,
because I my expectations for
of
everything
course.
that we wanted to realize through the museum, through the academy, through the school. My expectations are extremely high, and I've been accused of never being satisfied. They got that right, because we can be so much better.
Mm,
We can be, and the only thing that prevents us from being the best that we can be is financial independence. You
mm,
have to have financial independence, and it is difficult as a non-for-profit to be able to do what it is we try to do to support that neighborhood, because we are wedded to Soulsville, USA. We are hell bent on passing on this great music that was created at 926 East Macklemore. We're investing in children's lives. We're trying to serve them, and we're trying to save them. And we're
mm,
using music as a tool to make that happen. Uh, Last year, with the pandemic and what have you, nobody knows the impact, the
mm,
negative impact that it has had on us. And of course, all non-for-profits and businesses as well, restaurants, all of us are trying to recover,
mm-hmm.
and we have to work 4 times harder now because we've lost ground.
Right.
And so, it's important. But yes, Elizabeth, I have grown up through this experience of dealing with Soulsville and the and the museum and the academy, and I want to get out of the way,
Mm,
totally out of the way. I want somebody to call me and say, I'm sending you an MP3, Deanie, because I want you to hear the next Booker T and MGs out of the Stax Music Academy. I want you to hear Ruby Johnson. I want you to hear the baddest guitarist, blues guitarist since Albert King out of the Stax Music Academy. I'm not going to be happy until that happens. So I think that my role from now on is to just continue planting the seeds, because we've got the garden. You know, I might not ever get to see the plants grow up and bloom, but it's just something I cannot get out of my system. And if I can make a difference with this passion and with my expectation, then, you know, you all are just going to have to tolerate me, because I am going to be like a pit bull.
Well, I speak for all of us when I say it's our pleasure to tolerate you. Well, so we're coming to the end of our time. I just have one last question for you. You have, you know, we've scratched the surface tonight. You've accomplished so much, and you've had such an incredible impact on our city. And yet somehow I know that you don't feel like you're done, as evidenced by the pit bull statement. So what's next for you? And is there anything that is maybe still on your list that you want to check off?
Oh, yes, there are things still on my list. And oh, yes, I am still discovering who I want to be. And oh, no, I am not going to tell you what it is, because I have learned that until you can get the train on the track and it starts leaving the station in Memphis, Tennessee, it's best to keep it under wraps.
Okay. Well, there's our parting advice, Ms. Deanie Parker. This has been my absolute pleasure to talk with you tonight, and my face hurts from smiling. I just so many incredible stories, and we just thank you so much for being generous with your time.
Elizabeth, I thank you sincerely for the invitation, because I admire you as well. I watch you, young lady, and so you press on, and I'd like to connect with you when it is safe to pull off the mask. Okay?
Absolutely. The first cup of coffee or cocktail is on me. Thank you so much to Ms. Deanie Parker. And thank you to all of you for joining us tonight for this second virtual event in our Run This Town Women's Music Month series in partnership with the Stax Museum of American Soul. Join us next week, a week from today. The Stax Music Academy session singers are going to be sitting down in an interview to talk about their new song, Sisters, and you will not want to miss it. It'll be 7 p.m. on March 31st. We'll see you then.